Snowflakes clung to her eyelashes as she stepped out of the shadows. A tiny black girl, shivering, barefoot on the cobblestone street. She looked no older than 12. Her clothes were torn. Her hands were trembling. But her voice was steady. At a candlelit table outside an upscale restaurant, billionaire Edward Langford lifted his fork, ready to taste the first bite of his dinner. The girl lunged forward, desperate, whispering, "Sir, don't eat that." The entire restaurant froze. A waiter grabbed her arm. 2 security guards rushed in. People gasped. Phones came out. Edward's face tightened with annoyance, until he saw what was hidden beneath his plate, something that made his stomach drop. And the billionaire stopped breathing. Keep watching. The story gets darker, and then unforgettable. Before the snow, before the whisper, before the world turned upside down. There was Amara, 12 years old, black, homeless, invisible to the city. Amara had survived more winters than any child should. She slept under bridges, warmed her hands against restaurant vents, and collected half-eaten food to keep herself alive. But what the world didn't know was that Amara was brilliant. Her mother had once worked as a chef in one of the finest European hotels. Before life fell apart, she taught Amara everything: how food works, how smells reveal danger, how colors warn you long before taste does. That quiet knowledge would soon save a life. Across the city, Edward Langford, one of Europe's most influential billionaires, lived in a world of polished marble floors, armored vehicles, and silent staff. To him, the poor existed only as distant shapes outside tinted windows. His money had built empires, but also enemies. And tonight, as he sat beneath golden heaters outside La Fontaine du Lit, he believed he was untouchable. At the next table, Martin Hale, the restaurant manager, glared at Amara even before she spoke. He hated street kids, especially black ones. He saw them as filth, trouble, a stain on the restaurant image he fought so hard to present to wealthy clients. Inside the warm glow of the dining area, waiters exchanged irritated looks. Some felt pity. Others felt disgust. None of them expected a child to step forward and interrupt a billionaire's dinner. But Amara wasn't looking for pity. She had been watching Edward's plate for several minutes. Twice she tried to warn a waiter. Twice she was ignored. She recognized the smell. Metallic, chemical, wrong. Something her mother once told her to run from. And as the bitter wind tore through the street, Amara's heart pounded. Whatever was under that plate was dangerous, deadly. And she was the only one who knew. The snow thickened. The wind sharpened. And the moment Amara whispered, "Don't eat that," the entire street seemed to hold its breath. Edward Langford slowly lowered his fork. His pale blue eyes narrowed in confusion. But before he could ask anything, Martin Hale stormed toward the girl like a wolf who'd finally found prey. "What did I tell you, street rats?" Martin hissed, grabbing Amara's arm so tightly she winced. "This is a luxury establishment. You don't belong within 10 meters of our tables." Amara tried to pull free. "Sir, please. There's something wrong with his food." A few diners gasped. Others smirked, enjoying the spectacle. Edward watched, silent at first, unsure what to make of the situation. Martin leaned down until his nose nearly touched hers. "You little attention-seeking liar. You think scaring customers will get you scraps. Pathetic." He shoved her backward and she stumbled to the ground, hands scraping against ice and stone. A waiter whispered under his breath, "Someone should call child services." Another replied, "Why bother? Kids like her never make it." Their words stung, but Amara didn't care. She pushed herself up. "There's something metallic in the smell," she whispered urgently. "My mom taught me. Please, don't let him eat it." Martin laughed cruelly. "Oh, and you're some kind of food expert now?" But Edward's eyes shifted, just slightly. Not enough to reveal fear, but enough to reveal curiosity. "Let her speak," Edward said calmly. Martin froze. He hadn't expected the billionaire to take the child's side. "Sir, it's absurd," Martin stuttered. "She's a vagrant. Probably after attention or—" "Let her speak," Edward repeated, firmer. Amara stepped forward carefully, eyes locked on the plate. "That sauce. It's separating wrong. And look, She pointed, hands trembling. It's darker near the edges. My mother showed me. That happens when someone mixes something into it. A murmur rippled across the diners. Martin scoffed loudly. Oh, this is ridiculous. You're listening to a filthy beggar over trained chefs. She saw something, Edward said. No, sir, Martin insisted. She's lying. Look at her clothes. Look at her. Edward raised his hand. Silence. He lifted the plate. Everyone leaned in. Beneath the soft orange lighting, something glimmered in the sauce. A faint, unnatural metallic sheen. Edward's expression changed. Subtle. Sharp. Bring me the head chef, he ordered. Martin's face paled. Sir, with respect, this child is merely— Chef, now. As Martin rushed inside angrily, the bodyguards behind Edward stepped forward, forming a protective half-circle. The diners whispered louder now. What did she see? Is the food poisoned? Is this some kind of threat? The chef, a tall, nervous man named Lucien Moreau, emerged moments later. His hands trembled when Edward showed him the plate. Explain this, Edward demanded. Lucien stared in horror. I didn't prepare this dish. But it came from your kitchen, Edward said. Lucien swallowed hard. Yes, but someone must have switched it. Martin returned, sweating, furious. Sir, she is manipulating you. Look at her. Do you truly think some random girl knows more than professionals? Amara looked him dead in the eyes. I know danger when I smell it. The simplicity of her words stunned the surrounding tables. Edward motioned to his head bodyguard, Victor. Test the dish. A small device beeped when Victor dipped it into the sauce. He turned toward Edward, eyes wide. Sir, it contains high traces of ethylene glycol. A deadly toxin. More murmurs. One woman covered her mouth in shock. A man dropped his silverware. Martin stepped backward, shaking. That's impossible, Lucien whispered. Someone tried to poison you, sir. Edward's jaw clenched. Suddenly, the snow felt heavier. The night darker. His world, usually controlled and calculated, now carried the stir of betrayal. Amara stood small, cold, trembling. But she was the only reason he was still alive. Martin pointed at her again, desperate. She must be working with whoever did this. She distracted you. Maybe to switch the plates. But Victor shook his head. She never touched the table. I was watching. Edward finally spoke, voice like ice. Bring the surveillance footage. Martin froze completely. A waiter whispered, Is Martin involved? And suddenly, every eye on the street turned toward him. The power had shifted. The point of no return had arrived. Victor returned with the tablet in his gloved hands, snow still melting on top of it. Footage ready, sir. Edward exhaled slowly, steadying the storm inside him. Play it. The crowd pressed closer. Diners rose from their tables. Pedestrians halted mid-step. Even the street musicians nearby went silent, their music dying mid-note. On the screen, the restaurant's kitchen took shape. Bright stainless steel, chefs moving in polished rhythm. Then, there he was. Martin Hale, the man who had screamed at Amara. The man who had shoved her to the ground. The man who swore a child was lying. He moved behind the counter, glancing over his shoulder. He picked up a small bottle, dark glass, unmarked, twisted the cap, and poured something into a bowl of the Billionaire's signature truffle sauce. A few diners gasped. One woman whispered, "Oh my God." Martin lunged toward the tablet. That's doctored footage. She hacked it or something. His voice cracked on the last word. Victor stepped between him and the screen, expression hard. This is live security feed. Password protected. Only Mr. Langford and 2 managers can access it. Lucien, the head chef, swallowed hard. Martin, why would you do this? Martin's breathing turned ragged. His face was losing color. You don't understand. You don't— Edward slammed his palm onto the table, silverware rattling. Why were you trying to kill me? The snowstorm seemed to pause mid-air. Martin looked left, then right. No allies remained. Finally, he whispered, voice brittle, You ruined my brother's career. He worked for your company 18 years, and you fired him over a single mistake. Edward's jaw tightened. His error cost 4 workers their lives. You could have forgiven him. I couldn't ignore it. You took everything from him." Martin screamed. "He never got another job. He drank himself into the grave." Edward stared coldly. "And you thought murdering me would bring him back?" Martin's breath shook. "No, but it would make you pay." Gasps rippled through the street. Martin suddenly bolted, turned, and sprinted toward the alley. "Stop him!" someone shouted. But he didn't get far. Victor tackled him in the snow, pinning him down as Martin kicked and screamed like a man possessed. Amara flinched at the violence, stepping back. Edward approached her, slowly, carefully, as though approaching someone fragile. "Child, you saved my life tonight." Amara shook her head. "I just smelled something weird. My mom taught me to notice bad food. She worked in diners. I used to help her." Her voice cracked. "She got sick. I'm alone now." Edward's gaze softened. Something broken, forgotten inside him stirred awake. But before he responded, a police siren wailed in the distance, growing louder. When officers arrived, Victor handed over the footage and the toxin. Martin stopped struggling the second he saw the handcuffs. He looked at Amara with burning hatred. "This is your fault," he spat. Edward stepped forward, placing himself between the girl and her attacker. "You don't speak to her again." Martin was dragged into the cruiser. The billionaire turned to Amara. The snowflakes caught in her hair. Her clothes were threadbare, soaked, her arms bruised from where Martin grabbed her. "Why weren't you inside somewhere warm?" he asked gently. Amara shrugged. "No one lets kids like me inside. I pick up bottles. Sometimes they give me leftover bread." That's all. A sharp pain shot through Edward's chest, something he hadn't felt in years. Guilt. For all his wealth, all his influence, all the people he employed, he had never seen her, never seen any child like her, until tonight. A waiter approached nervously. "Sir, should we call child services for her?" Edward looked at Amara. Her eyes widened, fearful. "No," he said. "I'll handle this." He knelt, expensive suit in the snow, billionaire knees pressed to frozen stone, at eye level with a shivering, abandoned black girl who saved his life. "Amara," he said softly, "I owe you more than you can imagine." Her lip trembled. "No one owes me anything." He shook his head. "No, today, everything changes." The wind howled. The crowd watched. And Edward knew. This night would define the rest of his life. Snow swirled around them in soft, trembling spirals as Edward Langford stood before the crowd with Amara gently holding onto his coat sleeve. For a long moment he said nothing. The billionaire who once commanded boardrooms with a flick of his wrist now struggled to find words, strong enough to fill the space between them. Finally he exhaled. "Come with me," he said softly. Amara froze. She stared at the ground, her breath fogging in tiny bursts. "No one ever says that to me," she whispered. Edward's throat tightened. They should have. He took off his own wool coat, worth more than she'd seen in her life, and wrapped it around her shoulders. Her tiny frame disappeared inside it, the collar rising to her chin. The crowd murmured softly, some shocked, some moved to tears. The restaurant manager, a tall man named Gregory, stepped forward nervously. "Sir, what do you want us to do about the situation? The PR? The investigation? The press?" "Handle it," Edward said without looking at him. "I have something more important to do." He placed a gentle hand on Amara's back and led her toward his car. The chauffeurs, usually stiff and expressionless, opened the doors slowly, watching her with unexpected tenderness. As she climbed into the warmth of the luxurious interior, she hesitated. "Wait, am I allowed to sit?" Edward paused. "You saved my life, Amara. You belong wherever I am." Her eyes glistened. She climbed in. Edward brought her to his penthouse, a gleaming tower of glass and gold. Amara stepped in, her breath catching. Marble floors, warm lights, a fireplace bigger than her old bedroom. She had never seen anything like it. But instead of admiration, she looked down at her torn shirt and dirty boots. I'm not supposed to be in places like this." Edward knelt again. "How many times tonight?" and met her eyes. "You are exactly where you're supposed to be." He brought her warm food, soup, bread, fruit. She ate slowly at first, then as though her soul remembered hunger too well. When she finished, he gently asked, "Where is your mother now?" Amara swallowed. Her voice cracked. "She passed away 3 months ago. No one knew. No one cared. I've been on my own since." Edward's chest broke open. He had spent years building empires, acquiring companies, attending galas, yet somehow missed the simplest truth. A child could vanish unnoticed. Not anymore. "Amara," he said quietly, "you will never be alone again." Her lips trembled. "But why help me? People like you don't help people like me." He shook his head slowly. "I am the one who's been blind. You saw what others didn't. You saved a stranger, even though the world has given you nothing." At those words, she started to sob silently, shoulders shaking, hands covering her face. Edward didn't hesitate. He pulled her into a gentle embrace. She stiffened at first, then melted into it like a child who had forgotten what safety felt like. The story hit the news instantly. Billionaire's dish poisoned, homeless black girl saves his life. Restaurant manager arrested after attempted poisoning. Little hero, the child who exposed a murder plot. Social workers came, lawyers, journalists. Edward allowed only what was necessary, protecting Amara from every camera. He hired the best therapists, the best tutors, bought her clothes, shoes, books, enrolled her in a private school. But more than anything, he made sure she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Wanted. Martin pleaded guilty. The evidence was overwhelming. His confession in the snow was recorded by multiple witnesses. He received a long sentence. The judge addressed him sternly. "Your hatred could have killed a man. A child's courage stopped you." Martin bowed his head, defeated. Justice had found him. Weeks passed. Amara grew healthier, brighter. She laughed, awkwardly at first, then freely. She stopped shrinking away from adults. She sat at Edward's table every morning, her feet swinging above the floor, eating warm pancakes she once only saw from a distance. One evening, she looked up at him and asked, "Do you miss having a family?" Edward froze, because yes, he did. His wife had passed. He never remarried. He buried himself in work. Amara whispered, "You don't have to be lonely. I'm here." And something inside Edward healed. Months later, Edward adopted her. She became Amara Langford, no longer a nameless girl in the snow, no longer invisible, no longer hungry, and the world would come to know her not as a beggar, but as the child who saved a billionaire's life and changed his heart forever. Sometimes the smallest voice saves the biggest life, and teaches the world what humanity really means.